You're listening to The Heart of You on Paris Underground Radio.
You are listening to Paris Underground Radio. My name is Annette Deleu, and I am the host of The Heart of You. If you don't mind, take a quick second and give a little review to all of the podcasts you listen to that you love. So if you feel guided, give this podcast all of the stars that you want and write a review. It really does help the channel. Thanks so much. You are listening to episode 21. In today's episode, we are going to be discussing what Lightworkers are, what it means to actually ascend, and what is this terminology about New Earth. So let's just dive right in. Let's start with the term Lightworker. What does it mean to be a Lightworker? Essentially, all that it means is that you are actually here on Earth for a particular purpose in order to raise the vibration and the energy of the collective whole. So in other words, your job on this planet in this lifetime is to do something, and I will get to the various different ways in which Lightworkers do help the rest of the planet ascend. What you are doing is you are here to accomplish a particular job. So for example, there are various different types of Lightworkers out there, one of which is called the lighthouse. And if you're a lighthouse Lightworker, think about a lighthouse and what it does. It is basically the giant shining beacon of light attracting everyone to it and guiding the way. So when you are in this energy, there's not a lot that you have to do unless it's specifically stated in your soul contract. So sometimes being a lighthouse can simply mean just you existing on this planet right now is enough. And you interacting with people and bringing your light to everyone that you encounter is enough. Another type of Lightworker would be your spiritual teachers. So that one is pretty obvious. It's anyone who is sort of on the leading edge of all of the energies. So they're the ones that pick up any of the energies that are coming at us. They pick those up first. They sort of are able to show you what is going on within an energetic field. They can help you unlock your gifts. They can do all kinds of things to be able to help people to awaken and ascend to the higher levels of energy. Another one would be your grid workers. Grid workers are very interesting because they essentially work directly with the grids on planet Earth. So they work hand in hand with Gaia to be able to repair the grids on Earth that have been damaged by the lower and shadow energies, such as war, such as control, slavery, any blood that is shed on the earth, any sort of thing that has taken place that has not been aligned with divine love. That is something that a grid worker will help heal within the earth. A grid worker's energy will work in connection with the place in which they are. And that might mean that if you are a grid worker, you might do a great deal of traveling. You might move around a lot. You might have a lot of callings to go to all sorts of different places and you don't know why. And if you have that experience, that is exactly the reason why. Now, there are many different types of Lightworkers, as I mentioned, and I'm not going to go into all of them today. That is something you can actually look up pretty easily on the internet. If you want to Google Lightworker types, you can find all kinds of information on that. If you would like, though, I invite you to connect to your intuition and actually just ask your higher self and ask your angels and guides what type of Lightworker you are, and they'll give you the answer. Because the answer that you get directly from your higher self is always going to be much more clear, and it's going to be much more truthful than anything that you will find on the internet. Now, if you do look on the internet, there's nothing wrong with that. And you can just basically scan all the information that you're seeing and see which piece of information actually resonates with you. If you feel sort of a lightness in your heart, you get little chills, whatever it happens to be that lets you know that, yes, this is the correct answer. And there's also the aspect that you can be many different types of Lightworkers in one human soul. Many people can be the teacher Lightworker. Many people can be the grid worker, the clairvoyance, it doesn't matter. You can be multiple types. It just depends on what your particular goal and mission is on this planet. For example, I was speaking to a friend of mine yesterday, and she was talking about how she feels really drawn to animals and Gaia and plants and basically helping the earth repair herself. And that is obviously a grid worker, which is what I had talked about earlier. And when we were discussing this, she was talking about how she knew that that was her sole purpose on this planet. So what that says is that not only is she a grid worker, but then also she is tapping into her claircognizance, her clairvoyance, and all of those other senses that are allowing her to be able to really sense and know the things that she needs to do. And then let's say she moves on to really help other people understand what grid workers are and how they work, then she would be moving into that teacher light worker type or that teacher energy. Whereas for me, my specific sole purpose is about changing the template of relationships in connection. So romantic relationships, familial relationships, all kinds of relationships, there have been these very outdated templates as to what that is supposed to look like. And so I have gone through many things in my lifetime that have shown me the contrast of what unconditional love is. In experiencing those things, I have been able to actually anchor and root in what actual unconditional love is, as well as what it looks like within connection of friends, family, husbands, wives, whatever connection you have. This template is being changed by light workers like me, as well as there are, probably millions of other people on this planet that have that same template, that have that same sole purpose. I started off with the idea that I was a divine blueprint creator. And this was something that was actually told to me very, very early on in my spiritual awakening journey. And that was through a coach that I was working with on my spiritual awakening. That completely resonated with me. And then I just didn't know where it was going to go after that. So once I actually realized that my talents were definitely in the Akashic records, then I started realizing that it was possible that some of the other aspects of my light worker traits would have been transmutation. So that is actually working with people's ancestral lines to transmute all of that energy going back in through the generations. And that's just one of the pieces that I do within the Akashic records. And then eventually my clairvoyance and my psychic nature really came online, and then channeling and all of that. So as you eventually get all of your gifts that are solidly in place, you might find that in fact you will resonate with maybe 2 or 3 or more of these light worker traits. The last thing I do want to mention about light workers is that even though we talk about it as work, or we talk about it in terms of this is the reason why I came here, this is my job, this is my mission, I want to clarify that it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to relate to your actual job that makes you money. Many people are like, oh my gosh, what do? I need to change jobs. I need to do this. I need to do that. And that's not necessarily the case, where if you're a lighthouse, you don't necessarily have to even do anything. So you could do whatever brings you the most joy in your job, and that's perfectly fine. And you just have to basically live out your life being in the most joy possible. When you think about what it is that you're doing for a living and your actual sole purpose, they are, in fact, and can be 2 different things. Can they overlap and can they be the same? They can, but I just want to let you know that it doesn't have to be. So this brings me to what ascension actually means. When we depart our bodies, when our souls leave our bodies in what we would call death here on earth, they automatically ascend to the higher energies, to the higher dimensions, to the higher planes. And depending on where you are in your journey, you spend various different periods of time. And I use that term loosely because time doesn't really exist. It's simply a period where you are doing a life review and talking about okay, so what is it that my soul accomplished in that lifetime on earth, and what can we do the next time I go down? And that's exactly what it means. So you're ascending from, let's say, if you want to use a number scale, you're going from a 1 all the way up to, let's say, a 35 in that sort of higher energy. And let's say 35 is divine source, pure energy. Like, you can't get any higher than that. So we start off here on Earth at probably a 1 or a 2 or a 3. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to ascend up those different levels while still being incarnated on Earth. So in other words, we're not having to actually die in order to get into those higher levels of consciousness, which is really beautiful. And it's a really wonderful way to basically create what they're calling this new Earth. Every single person on this planet has the capability of ascending to this higher level of energy, this higher level of love and light. Okay. It's not to say that some people won't, but a majority of the people are actually going to eventually get there. It may take them many more lifetimes, but they are going to get there. And eventually the whole planet will get there. And there are other souls that may choose not to do that, in which they will likely stay stuck in a particular dimension, if you will, or in a particular energy. And maybe their souls they may not move on to another lifetime. So instead of reincarnating, that does happen. If you're stuck in a lower energy, your soul can get stuck here on Earth, basically re-looping various different events over the course of your lifetime. That's why we have, when we spoke to Angie DeCanalis a few episodes ago, she was talking about helping these souls through the gateways. And that is exactly what we're talking about here, is that once people get to this particular place of everybody on Earth ascending to these higher levels of frequency, these higher levels of light, then the people and the souls that are still staying in that lower energy and still staying stuck there will likely stay stuck there. So there's nothing anybody has to worry about in terms of, will I ascend? I need to ascend quicker. I need to do this faster. There is no quicker or faster. Everybody is doing it at their own pace. And since you are already listening to this podcast, that means you are already doing the work. You already know about what your path is to a certain extent. So there is no worry. I want you to be aware that there are some people out there who do actually talk about how you have to get on board and you must do this by this exact time. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind and you're not going to get on New Earth and all of this nonsense. So I just want to make you understand that if anybody's peddling that kind of fear, just stop listening altogether. Just stop listening immediately, because it's not about the timing of when you quote unquote get on board. It is a process, and it is a constant process. The process of spiritual awakening, the process of ascension, is a constant one. There's no like, oh, hey, guess what? We've reached it. We've reached our final level and we are done with our spiritual awakening. Because if we did that, we would basically be source divine energy in our human bodies. And that isn't even possible at this moment, because our human bodies would not be able to handle that type of energy. Now, is that to say that it could happen in the future? Yeah, absolutely it could. But it's going to take a long time for our human bodies to physiologically adapt and be able to hold that type of energy. It's sort of the difference between now in our human bodies being able to touch a star, right? So the sun is a star. If you went to the sun and tried to touch it, you'd burn up. And if you are able to ascend to a particular light quotient in a human body, would you be able to possibly touch a star and not burn up? Maybe. I mean, maybe that might happen in, a billion years. I'm not sure. But all I know right now is that the ascension process is essentially an ongoing process. Are you looking for a new book to read? Because I know I always am. Head to Storytime in Paris on Paris Underground Radio with your host, Jennifer Garrity, as she interviews fascinating authors that have a French connection. We will be right back with The Heart of You after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to The Heart of You on Paris Underground Radio. I would like to put your mind at ease to know that just because you haven't reached a certain level, or if you feel like you're still working on certain blocks or certain healing, that it is okay. You need to take your time. You need to do it in the time that you need to do it. Basically, Earth is already on her ascension process. She's already in that process of increasing the light quotient, increasing the unconditional love, increasing that divine source energy. And one of the things that you're seeing right now in the world is that as that light quotient increases, all of the things that do not belong in that energy are going to start to fall away, which is why things in the world are starting to look very topsy-turvy, because essentially it's that old, darker shadow energy that is still fighting to stay alive, even though it knows that it's starting to die out. Because as more people do start ascending, the less room there is going to be for things like fear. So if you can imagine taking your ascension, your spiritual awakening template, and what you have gone through, which is integrating shadows and going through dark nights of the soul and making room for more love in your life, the planet, the earth, everybody on it is going through that same process on a large scale as well as a small scale. So every single country will go through that process. Every bit of earth, every person, every animal, everything on the planet will go through this at some point. Think about it in terms of how you've lived your lives up until this point. It has been in an effort to be able to learn from each other, from all of the experiences that you have here on earth. And when it comes down to the process of ascension, you have to look back to the past. You have to look at your Akashic records to see where you've been, and then you will be able to see where you are going. In that respect, everybody has their own journey. Everybody has their own time frame on earth in which case they are going to be ascending. It is not to compare yourself to another. It is not to make yourself better than another. It is not to make yourself feel superior than another, as those are all egoic thoughts and egoic emotions that you have in your mind space. When it comes to being able to ascend and be on your path, you will face these shadows. You will face these shadows of ego, and you will experience the ego death. The ego death is part of what a lot of people call the dark night of the soul. You may have many in a lifetime. You may have had an entire lifetime that was a dark night of the soul. But essentially what that means is that you are diving down deep into those shadows of what you fear. You are diving down into those shadows of hatred. You are diving into all of that to be able to recognize it, to integrate it, and understand that your shadow also needs to be loved. The shadow within all of us needs to be loved. And that is the only way that people can ascend. It's not by denying your shadow. It's not by condemning fear. It is by embracing it and saying, okay, you know what? You've served a purpose in my life, and I appreciate it. And I see you, and I love you. And let's move forward. Let's move forward in a different direction. Let's move forward in confidence and love, as opposed to fear and hatred. It is a choice. It is a choice for most people to decide whether or not they are going to have an incredible experience on this awakening path, or this ascension path, however you would like to frame it. Some people are on this ascension path and they don't even know they're on it. And they're continuing to grow, and they're continuing to do the work that they're meant to do here on this planet. You don't have to be aware of it in order to be doing it. Being aware of it only helps you accelerate faster. If you have other people in your life right now that you feel are quote unquote asleep or not awake yet, that doesn't mean that they're not going to wake up tomorrow. You have to understand that your impact, your individual impact as a light worker on humanity as a whole is so much more significant than you understand. Every time you touch somebody's life energetically, even in passing somebody on the street, could make all the difference in the world in that person's awakening. I want you to understand that basically when this comes to your job as a light worker, you may be on autopilot most of the time, and that is okay. If you have chosen to really put in the work and accelerate your ascension process, yes, it is a difficult one. And especially those who will have spontaneous awakenings is going to be even more difficult. Imagine those of you who have gone through your spiritual awakening or who are now going through your spiritual awakening, how sort of difficult the path has been up until now. And imagine having all of that done within a couple of months or 6 months. I've discussed many times that my spiritual awakening has taken place over the course of the last 10 years. So just imagine that for some people, they are going to be choosing to wake up pretty quickly, and it's going to be very jarring for their human bodies. So have compassion for everybody, no matter whether or not you feel like they're asleep or they're awake. Look at somebody with the eyes of that divine energy and understand they could be going through their awakening process right now and you don't even know it. Maybe they are deep down in their shadow energy trying to embrace and integrate that shadow energy. And maybe sometimes what that looks like is them acting in a way that you would prefer them not to act. In those particular moments, obviously you can extricate yourself from the situation if you don't want to be part of that. I just want you to know that it is also divinely guided for people to go through their shadow. When you go through all of this and you understand what it means to continue to ascend, it allows you to have absolute compassion for everyone else who is going through this process. And then you can extend that compassion even further to entire countries, to entire groups of people. It doesn't matter who you're talking about. You can extend this compassion that everybody is going through these growing pains. Everyone is going through this process of ascension. And some people are having an easier time of it than others. And if you are, in fact, a light worker, it is up to you to be the example. It is up to you to lead the way in this entire process. And it is up to you to also help others in their ascension process. One of my all-time favorite movies and movie franchises is actually Star Wars. I used to watch the very first Star Wars movie, which is A New Hope, basically every day when I came home from school for like a month. And I connected so much to the story and to everything about it. And if you really look at the entire storyline, it is the hero's journey. It is the process of awakening. I joke with a friend of mine occasionally about the metachlorian count. That could also be used as like a metaphor for our light quotient and how we are ascending. I don't know about you, but I kind of want to be Yoda. Who do you want to be? If you have any further questions about this subject, about lightworkers or ascension or pretty much anything, if you are curious, if you have questions, feel free to email me at annette@infinitesoullove.com. You can also reach me on my website at infinitesoullove.com and all social media at infinitesoullove1111.
This episode of The Heart of You was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please visit parisundergroundradio.com.